You has made your mistake.
Yeah, but
And many mistakes before that.
Wait, I have not...
Many.
Actually, I had...
Many mistakes before that. So, I still has to erase you.
By Grandpa's hammer. What a savings.
Go! Get to the chopper!
I don't know half of you half as well as I should like, and I like less than half of you half as well as you deserve.
You are without doubt the worst pirate I've ever heard of.
But you have heard of.
Spartans! Prepare for glory!
Look at the size of that boy's head. Shh. I'm not kidding, it's like an orange on a toothpick.
Marriage. Marriage is what brings us together today.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Fearless with Mark and Amber. We are so glad you're here. This is where we have honest conversations to help you know Christ more deeply, lead your family faithfully, and discern the culture through a biblical worldview. I'm Amber Archer, and joining me is my husband, author, director, speaker, Mark Archer.
We are doomed! Run away! Run for my life!
Together, we're missionaries using media to help people shepherd souls in a world competing for them. You can learn more about us and our ministry at fearlessfeatures.org. And if you'd like to partner with us in reaching families with hope in Christ through media, visit fearlessfeatures.org to share your support today.
That's not our policy.
Now let's jump into today's conversation.
Did you ever think that maybe there's more to life than being really, really, really ridiculously good looking?
Hello.
Hi.
I brought my smolder today.
Yeah. So I am really excited about today's conversation. So we met a gentleman, Gary Kah, at the Wisconsin
Worldview Matters Conference.
Worldview Matters Conference. Thank you. And didn't realize that we lived in the same state together.
Yep. He's just down the road.
Yeah. But he has a fascinating story. And we don't have a lot of time to spend on the front end of this because we just need to get to the program.
Yeah, because it's really, really compelling. And buckle up, Buttercup.
Pertinent to today's conversations.
Yep. So let's go.
Well, Gary, thank you so much for joining Mark and I on the podcast. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's good to be on with you. And it's been a few months since we last saw each other up in the Green Bay area.
Yes. And so can you, and that was the thing, we had the privilege of seeing your presentation, but for our viewing audience and those who don't know you, can you just give us a little bit of background about yourself and your mission and ministry and what you're doing?
Sure. My background largely grew out of my parents' background. They both grew up in Europe during World War II. My dad was 12 years old when he and his family had to flee from the communists in Croatia. They only had 1 or 2 days' notice, lost everything they had, ran for their lives, got out. And then a few months later, when he was 13, he was in a boarding school in the mountains of Austria. Came to find out that they were preparing these 12 to 16-year-old kids to be sent to the Eastern Front to fight for Hitler. And the day my dad found out about that, he and a friend jumped out of a 2-story window and ran for their lives and amazingly got away. It's really an act of God that they made it. He lived in a barn for the last few weeks of the war, just so they couldn't find him. After the war, he and his cousins went into Germany to get work, to try to save up money to be able to come to the United States, where they had an uncle in Dayton, Ohio, who was willing to sponsor them in. And while in Germany, he met my mother, who grew up under Hitler, with the father, my grandfather, who was outspoken against Hitler to the point where 2 of Hitler's henchmen showed up in their little village of 300 looking for my grandpa one day.
Wow.
And the mayor tipped off my grandpa about it, and he went and hid out in the forests for a time. And the mayor sent the stooges looking for my grandpa in the wrong direction intentionally. It's like something out of the movies, but it really happened. But they, both of my parents, made it through the war, got married, came to the U.S., and then I was born in the 50s. And I grew up in the Dayton, Ohio area. And shortly after becoming a Christian, in 6th grade, I remember studying World War II through our teacher. And between that and what I already knew from my parents, I just felt compelled to pray to God. I was sitting in my classroom and I prayed silently, Lord, if anything were to ever happen in the United States like what happened in Europe during World War II, I promise I will take a stand for you no matter what. And you never think at that age that God might take you up on that someday. So now fast forward over many years, I ended up becoming the Europe and Middle East trade specialist for the government of Indiana. My ultimate boss was then Lieutenant Governor John Mutz. I organized trade missions for him where I'd lead delegations overseas to increase exports from Indiana to create more jobs on the home front. It was a type of economic development position. And I also took some trips on my own overseas. My meetings were organized through our U.S. embassies. And so I usually spent anywhere from 2 to 4 days at a time with people at the embassies, specifically people working in the commercial sections of the embassies. And when you spend that kind of time together, you kind of get to know people. You talk about international economic developments because that was part of our jobs, right? So that was a natural. And then you just go one step further and you're talking about international political developments. And sometimes we'd even get into religious discussions. And so to make a long story short, over the few years that I was in that position, I really was astonished to discover how many people working for our State Department, which is, our embassy system, who were very open to the idea of global government. And I felt that in a crisis, they would have probably been more loyal to an empowered United Nations than to defending our U.S. Constitution and our republic. And that bothered me, considering where my parents, what they went through. And so I was maybe more sensitized to this type of thing because of my upbringing and background. And so I would ask a lot of questions without revealing where I was coming from on that. Just, because I discovered there's a time to talk and a time to listen. And if you let people know where you're at right away, they'll clam up and maybe not say anything else. So this was in the information gathering phase of my life. And I found out that these same people who supported globalism, generally speaking, were not very fond of Bible-believing Christians and Jews, which threw up further flags. And then again, to make a longer story short, eventually, believe it or not, I was invited to join 2 organizations that were actually involved in this pursuit of globalism and ultimately world government.
Wow.
And one was within the government. And I was invited to join that organization. They recruited me the last year that I was in my job. And then the other organization came right after I left my job. And I can only attribute that to the Lord, because in both cases, to the best of my knowledge, I was by far the youngest person in either of those organizations. And in fact, in the one that was within our government system, I was the youngest by at least 10 years. I never met anyone who wasn't at least 10 years older than I was. So in that particular organization, I was in it 7 years as a volunteer. And the last 3 years, I had secret clearance and access to classified information. So I try to be a little bit careful about that. But it was in an organization in the emergency management circles. If there was a national crisis, we'd have been called in to serve and do certain things. And it was really my experience in that organization that helped me to connect the dots regarding globalism more than anything else. The other organization that I was invited to join was called the World Constitution and Parliament Association, which the name kind of says it all. It's quite blatant. But back in those days, they would find out about you. You couldn't find out about them. This was in days before the internet. Nobody really knew about this organization except the people in it. And in fact, I've got here a letterhead. I pulled it out before the program so I could hold it up so people could see it. It's just one piece of documentation I had from them over about a 4-year period. And you'll notice on the upper left-hand corner is the name of Eagle Arvik. I don't know if you can make that out or not. But he was the chairman of the Nobel Prize Committee at the time. And he was the first name that appeared on a lot of their stationery. And just a few other people who were in the organization. There were several vice presidents. One of them was a former U.S. Attorney General by the name of Ramsey Clark, who served under Lyndon Johnson and the first year of the Nixon administration. So here's a guy who's over our Justice Department and FBI and was a vice president in this organization dedicated to bringing about global government eventually. They were already having mock sessions of a world parliament, trying to work bugs out of it, just in a type of setting where they're tweaking things and trying to get everything ready. So someday this would all be in place to be able to go public with it. And
Well,
go ahead.
And can I say, so what year is this? And I think it's important for people to realize and understand a lot of what we see is really a long game kind of plan. When we tend to look at everything very right now, immediate, what's in front of our face, but those who are planning things, I mean, it's outliving them is really.
Yeah. No, this was in the late 1980s. And the goal at that time was to begin to kind of go public around the year 2000, because they realized if you're going to have global government, you can't keep it quiet forever. You've got to get people on board with you. And they felt that once they have a critical mass, a term that they used a lot, then they could begin to feel comfortable in pushing the agenda forward. And so today we're seeing this. A lot of this is out in the open now. What was in the shadows 30 or 40 years ago, now it's out in the open. But specifically, what this organization, what I viewed as their purpose being, was to create what would eventually appear as a grassroots democratic movement, wanting to move us into a global system in the name of fairness and as basically a Marxist globalist view of things. But they covered all the religions. One of the vice presidents was Dr. Inamullah Khan, who at the time was the president of the World Muslim Congress out of Pakistan, arguably one of the most powerful Muslims in the world at the time. You also had Buddhists, you had Jews, you had Christians. In fact, Cynthia Waddell, who at one time was the president of the World Council of Churches, was in this organization. So they covered all the religions. They knew they had to somehow help pull that together if there's going to be any chance of world government down the road. But a lot of these people belong to 2 or 3 other globalist organizations, so that if one group gets exposed, then they can kind of cut that off for a time and work through the other organizations in a similar kind of way. For example, the top 3 organizers in this group, this is kind of mind-boggling, I admit. They were also prominent members in an organization called World Union, which I tracked down. I'd never heard of it before. It was headquartered in India. And World Union was sister organizations with World Goodwill, which is headquartered in London and New York. I think they also have a branch maybe in Geneva. And that organization is a very occultic group that was founded by Alice Bailey.
Oh, gee.
And you know about Alice Bailey, referred to as the mother of the New Age movement.
We have talked extensively about Alice.
Yeah. And she, of course, founded Lucifer Publishing Company, and then a couple years later renamed it Lucis Trust, and that still exists in New York City. And so these people, what I'm getting at is they're just one step removed from Alice Bailey and Lucifer Publishing Company. They were the 3 top ringleaders in this organization that happened to have the chairman of the Nobel Prize Committee, which explained why so many Nobel Prize recipients were in this organization, and all kinds of religious leaders. One of the leaders of Greenpeace was a vice president, and I already mentioned Ramsey Clark, a former U.S. Attorney General, also former UN ambassadors, mayors of large cities. Again, I was scratching my head at one point in time of how in the world I was in this organization, but I think they saw me as maybe an up-and-coming political figure in the Midwest, because my job was considered political. And the way these people work, they like to influence you, bring you into their circles, and kind of help set the stage for the future. And so, yeah, these were just a few of the experiences I had. And so, of course, the Lord brought to my attention that commitment I made at a young age. And so I set out to write a book to try to document all of this, because you can talk about it till you turn blue in the face, but unless you can actually document it, people aren't going to listen.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I thought would take 2 years took 6 years.
Wow.
And it was not easy. I mean, it seemed like we had everything but the kitchen sink thrown at us spiritually. We really learned what spiritual warfare was all about during that 6-year period. But eventually my book came out. The pre-release was in late 1991, and officially the launch date was 1992. That's when my book, En Route to Global Occupation, came out. And here's a copy of it. And what happened was Pastor Chuck Smith of Costa Mesa Calvary Chapel somehow got hold of the book, and without us knowing about it, quoted from it from the pulpit on a Sunday morning and told all of his people to go out and get a copy, because he said, you need to know about this. This is for real. And so that happened, and the rest was history. All kinds of doors opened up. And actually, in the first 2 months that my book was out, I did over 40 talk shows, and the first year, like 180 talk shows. It was crazy, and became a regular on Point of View with Marlon Maddox out of Texas. I don't know if you remember that program, but it was a really big program at the time, discussing economic, political, and religious developments impacting Christians. And then also Beverly LaHaye Live, which, of course, she headed up Concerned Women for America, and a lot of other programs. And so that really helped to get the message out. And that was in the 1990s. And needless to say, the people within the World Constitutional Parliament Association pretty much hated me. And but what happened was I published their phone number in my book and told people to call them up and tell them they know all about what they're up to. And they didn't appreciate that too much. But they backed off a lot for a time and kind of changed their MO and how they operate, became much more blatantly new agey to appeal kind of to that crowd. But they took on a different face, and they still exist. But I think a lot of what they were doing was taken up by groups like the World Federalist Association, the World Future Society, and a whole bunch of other groups out there now. I mean, there's hundreds, literally hundreds, if not thousands, but at least hundreds of organizations networking together to bring this about. And most people are completely unaware of this concerted effort, really a planned effort that's underway to bring this into reality, this global system of government.
So I'm really now I'm totally intrigued and fascinated with what you're saying, because especially with the Alice Bailey and this whole mindset of globalist, elitist. Because we see now, especially in education, they're continuing to talk about and tell kids that you need to be a good global citizen. Like global citizen is everywhere. And so now I'm looking at it and going, okay, so what happened from the 90s to now the 2020s? Like why did that fall off? What happened with education, and what happened?
Well, these organizations successfully penetrated public education in a major way.
Yes.
And it goes back even further than the 80s. I mean, back to the General Education Board that the Rockefeller foundations were supporting early on, and then eventually the National Education Association that was lock and step with this agenda. And by the 1990s, you already had a majority of university professors in the loop as far as being very open, at the very least, to global government, and a lot of them openly beginning to push that concept within the university system. And so at the last national election that we had, the statistic I remember seeing was that I think it was 93% of college professors who were polled voted leftist politically, 93%. So it's not even remotely balanced out there. If you send your son or daughter to a public university, or a state-run university, they're going to get a good dose of this kind of stuff and probably come out with a completely different worldview than with what they went in with. And so the same can be said of Washington, D.C. itself, the bureaucrats, which now being referred to as the deep state. Over 90% of them voted Democrat. And not that Republicans have it all together. They don't. We know that. But when you look at what the Democratic Party of today stands for, and you have over 90% of the employees in Washington, D.C. voting in that direction, and 93% of college professors, and you've got about 90% of the media also open to this concept of globalism. So we're getting it from all angles. And so now today you're facing a situation where our young people under the age of 35, between 60 and 70% of them, their political views are much more in line with socialism than capitalism or the free enterprise system. And if you get 80%, and let's take it down to our cities, our big cities. Our big cities generally are more liberal and left-leaning than the overall American population. And in a lot of big cities, you've got, I'd say a good average would be about close to 45% of people who are eligible to vote lean more socialistic now. So if on a given day you have 80% of them turn out to vote and conservatives only turn out at 50 or 60% for whatever reasons because they're disillusioned, socialists are now in a position where they can take almost any city in the United States on any given day. And they're doing that. They've taken New York, they've taken Seattle, Portland, Minneapolis, and they're going right down the line. And conservatives haven't fully caught on to that yet. So unless we turn out with like an 80% vote, there's a chance that they can take over big cities one by one. And it's interesting, back in the day when I was in the World Constitution and Parliament Association for those 4 years, probably the number one group of people that composed that organization at the time were mayors of big cities, prominent big cities, is one of the first thing I noticed. And now, more recently, I want to make sure I get this right. I think it was in February, Jacob Fry, the mayor of Minneapolis, and Zoran Mamdani of New York announced that they were going to create a coalition of mayors. They were going to found a new organization, obviously to help empower left-leaning mayors, and they believe there's strength in numbers. And so we need to take this seriously. It's very real, and it's much more organized than it ever was 30 or 40 years ago.
So where do we go from here? For those who are hold the biblical worldview, and we've all seen the numbers really of those who show up to vote doesn't necessarily look good. What's the message of hope for people? Where do we go from here, Gary? What's the solution to this?
The solution is, and I like this, we all have heard of Frank Siller, who started Tunnel to Towers organization, and his motto is, let us do good. Well, I don't even know if he's a Christian or not. Maybe he is, but that motto, let us do good. We have an obligation as Christians, even if it looks as if we don't stand a chance and this agenda is ultimately going to come about. We have an obligation before the Lord to stand for righteousness, if for no other reason than to be the conscience publicly, that people still know what is right and wrong, or at least hear about it. Because the Bible warned that in the end times, people's consciences would be seared as with a hot iron, that they would follow seductive teachings, teachings of demons even. Paul wrote in 1st and 2nd Timothy in chapters 4 of each letter, he warned people about this kind of deception, that people would not endure sound doctrine anymore. So even if it appears politically to be in a losing effort, we still have an obligation to stand firm before the Lord. And if we do that and do it effectively and enough people join us, God in his mercy and grace, he'd be more than willing to give us more time.
Amen.
And, in the Old Testament, in one passage, God said that he looked for someone to stand in the gap and found none. how wonderful it would be if there are thousands and thousands of people in the U.S. who stand in the gap and let people know what's going on, and document that and say, here's why it's dangerous. This is going to be the fallout if these people have their way and get into power. For me, it's been easier to speak on this because of what my parents went through. So they had firsthand experience. And my mom, before she passed a few years ago, she's 89 when she passed, she made the statement, she said, I went through all of this once in my lifetime. I never thought I'd have to go through it again. And she saw in her old age where things were going, and so I have a very strong calling, I guess you'd say, on my life. If I wouldn't take a stand on this, I'd feel so guilty I couldn't live with myself. And so our goal has been to, in a credible way, document these developments, let people know what's going on and how this will be impacting us and why it's important to take a stand. And so years ago, we were getting so many letters in the mail, we couldn't respond to them all anymore. So we started a quarterly research journal called Hope for the World Update. Actually, we started it 30 years ago in 1996. And it's about a 16 to 20 pager. Usually about 10 articles are in there. I write the lead article, and then experts from around the world who are on the cutting edge of this contribute articles. And really, it helps a whole lot to keep people informed of a lot of things that aren't coming out through our major media sources. And people can subscribe to that if they go to our website, which is GaryKah.org, quite simply. And so my two books help lay the foundation for understanding the globalist movement in a comprehensive way. But then to keep people up to date, that's the purpose of our journal. Because if I tried to write a book on this now, it'd be out of date before it would come out. Things are moving so quickly. So a quarterly journal is much more effective in doing that.
Yeah. Well, and that really is the scary part of it all, right? Because it continues to just change over and over, and it goes so quickly. It's like when we're sitting and working on films, and we're like, "This is so timely and so poignant," and then the next day something new happens, and we're going, "Whoa, wait a minute!"
Yeah, it unfolds in real time as you're editing. There are days where I put something in, and literally the next morning, something that the day before you edited in that you were predicting was going to happen, and the next day it's in the headlines.
Right.
You literally can't keep up with it.
No. Yeah, and a good example of this is something I just pulled out the other day, that these protests we're seeing more recently in Madison, Wisconsin, and people are wondering, how do these people organize so quickly? But if you look at it, you've got somebody in San Francisco one day in the middle of a protest, and the next day they're in Madison, and the next day they're in New York. They're getting paid to do this.
Yeah.
And just a couple of statistics that are quite timely right now. 3 major organizations that have been involved in Madison in the protests: the Party for Socialism and Liberation, also Freedom Inc., which is a Madison-based social justice nonprofit, and a third organization called the Freedom Road Socialist Organization, a Marxist-Leninist political group. These people have all been involved. And altogether, you've got a network of 600 different groups with a total revenue of some $2 billion going into this network to help fund these protests. And perhaps the biggest contributor was a guy I'd never heard of before, but we need to be familiar with this name. His name is Neville Roy Singham, spelled Singham. He lives in Shanghai, China, and roughly $285 million have been flowing from Singham into this movement. That's just from one wealthy person. He's a Marxist tycoon promoting this globalist agenda. And that's not even counting George Soros and his foundations and the Rockefeller foundations. And so you get the picture of how big this is. And recently, a House panel subpoenaed 3 of these left-wing groups, trying to get to the bottom because they were directly tied to this Neville Singham. And so this is beginning now to unfold, but there hasn't been a whole lot. But I'm just throwing that out there because it shows, the magnitude of this and that these people mean business.
Yeah.
And our young people are being sucked into it because they were prepared through a lot of their college experiences and what they'd been taught. And so they're becoming very active in this movement, unfortunately.
Yeah. It's amazing to watch how this, like you, I mean, I'm a little younger than you, but I remember, and I've had conversations with my friends from high school, one in particular, and I said, did you ever think when we were sitting in Bible class in the early 90s and talking about the end times that, when you're 17, 18 years old, you think, oh, that would be awesome to see the end times,
to live through it,
live through that. I said, did you ever actually think that we would be seeing what we're seeing right now? Because it's quite terrifying without the balance of being daily in the Word and realizing
Amen.
Take comfort, because the Lord told us that this was going to happen. So why are we surprised? Why are we fearful?
Mm-hmm.
We should be concerned, and we should, like you said, we should be fighting against it. But the Lord should find us fighting,
Mm-hmm.
and then we should not stop fighting until we hear the trumpet sound. And that's Him
That's right.
saying, "Okay, you're done now."
1 plus God's a majority.
That's right.
That's right. Yeah, we are to take a stand until we can't take a stand anymore,
Mhm.
or until the Lord returns. And so it's easy to get scared with all this subject matter and
Mhm.
everything going on. And so we work really hard. Obviously, we call our organization Hope for the World. And so after we scare people to death, we tell them what the hope is,
Yeah.
because it really is the only hope
Yeah,
that we
absolutely.
have. And
Yeah.
that's in Jesus. Everything else is a distraction to take us down dangerous rabbit trails. And
Yeah.
people are falling for it, unfortunately, because doesn't seem to be a lot of discernment anymore and common sense. And so we do what we can. We get our share of threats over the years. We've had a few things happen, but God has protected us in His mercy and grace, and so we're going to continue with His help to stand strong and to give people hope. All this information should drive people to want to be closer to Jesus than ever before, and to have a very close personal walk and relationship with Him. And that's the ultimate solution. And there are so many wonderful passages of Scripture. I've prepared a whole sheet of them for myself that I read regularly, just to remind myself, and of course the big one is 2 Timothy 1:7. For God did not give us a spirit of fear, but a spirit of power, of love, and of a sound mind. And so even in Paul's day, in his writings to Timothy, because it was intimidating back then. I mean, they were rounding Christians up and putting them to death. And yet most of these Christians weren't fearful. They were willing to put their lives on the line for the cause of Christ, for His sake, because they were so fervent in their beliefs and were convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt that Jesus was who He said He was. And that's why they were willing to die for Him. And I tend to think things are going to get pretty difficult in this country. So I don't want to paint a rosy picture like all this is going to change suddenly and we've got 100 years left. We've had it so easy and so good in this country for so long that I tend to believe God is going to allow things to get to a point where we really have to choose who we are going to believe in and be willing to put ourselves on the line.
Yeah.
And right now, a lot of Christians aren't at that point. They kind of loosely believe in Jesus. Some of them just because their grandparents were pastors or something, and they figure, well, I'm not Buddhist or Hindu, so I must be Christian. I mean, and they go to church at Christmas and Easter and not much in between. But I are really going to have to choose whether they really believe Jesus or don't. And I think that's where the dividing line is going to be. And also, I might throw this in there. We haven't talked about this yet, but this same globalist movement, along with being anti-Christian, is extremely anti-Semitic. They have a strong hatred for anything Israel or Jewish. And so I think a lot of the lines are going to be drawn on that issue as well. As Christians, do we believe what the end time prophecies have to say about Israel and about the Jews being regathered from the four corners of the earth and making Aliyah back to Israel? And it's interesting today, 47% of all the Jews in the world are back in Israel.
Wow. I did not know
when,
that.
Yeah, when Jesus walked the earth, it was estimated to be around 30%. So you actually have a higher percentage of Jews of the world being back in Israel today than even in Jesus' time. And yet people don't see that this is something that is a fulfillment of prophecy. And they try to say, oh, it's referring to things that happened long ago, and so at a very time when we need to be heeding the prophecies of Scripture, people are coming up with every kind of excuse to try to explain it all away and not really take note of it. And that's unfortunate.
Well, and I think too, because we can all sit here because we're invested and want to know and learn about these things, and I mean, we have our answers as to why we do, but why do you think it is that people shy away from actually knowing the truth? And how does it actually, because I think there's a lot of people who look at it and go, well, I don't need to know these things. I don't need to know about the globalist movement. I don't need to know about the Marxist communist movement. Well, because I look at it and go, well, ignorance is a choice. So
Yeah.
why is it important for people to understand this?
Okay. Well, I just happened to put together a list that says the danger in losing our U.S. freedoms and sovereignty to a global system of government.
Yeah.
5 reasons to be concerned about a new world order.
Yeah.
Because I thought if parents can't talk to their college kids about this, they're going to say, what's wrong with the world government? Wouldn't that bring about world peace and world unity? If we don't have militaries of individual nations that can fight each other anymore, just think we'd finally have global peace and worldwide bliss. Well, not so. So 5 good reasons. This is probably oversimplification, but I think it helps people to get to the core of it. Number 1, in the U.S., we would lose our current system of checks and balances, which have served us so well for hundreds of years and helped make the United States what it is and given us the freedoms that we have. That would be out the window. Secondly, our U.S. Constitution, it would have to be drastically changed in order to come into a world government system. They could do it through international treaties and bypass the Constitution, but for the most part, we would no longer be living under our current system of government, which, through our Constitution, which again has defended our freedoms. Thirdly, we would have a weaker voice in government. Think about it. If people are complaining now about people in Washington not listening to us, our elected officials not listening to us, what do you think it would be like if we have a world government potentially headquartered somewhere in Europe or the Middle East? You think that these international bureaucrats are really going to care what we think? They're going to do whatever they want to do. So control of our government system would be removed further away from us. And that's the irony, because a lot of this is taking place in the name of democracy. But ultimately, this is the furthest thing from democracy.
Well, and I think, and to that point though, and I also want to just add that a lot of times, because again, like we said towards the beginning, that sometimes we only look at what's happening right now. What we're talking about is really going to affect our children and our children's children.
Yeah, absolutely. No question about it. And then the fourth one, and this might get Americans' attention more than anything else because it affects our pocketbook. And most people don't stop to think about this. An international tax will be imposed to fund this world government system. The money has to come from somewhere. They've already talked about an income tax, about levying an income tax, a global income tax. But even if they can't get that done right away, they're looking at possibly putting a tax on all international currency transactions, on international travel, even on people's wells. If you own a farm and have your own well, this came up before the UN a few years ago. They even want to tax that. So they're looking at all options. All options are on the table for taxes. So if you're already tired of the 7 or 8 different taxes you're paying, the local, state, federal, Social Security, and on, state sales taxes, property taxes, add to that an international tax that probably eventually would be maybe the biggest or most significant of all. And so we will have a lot less money in our pockets than we do now. And then the fifth reason I give is those people who have been at the forefront of pushing, excuse me, for an international form of government over the last 70 years or so have consistently been anti-Christian and anti-Jewish in their political and religious worldview. So when you look at who's pushing this agenda right now, like-minded people are ultimately going to be in charge. And, Hitler wrote Mein Kampf. If people read that book, they would have known where he's going with all this, but people didn't take it seriously. Most people didn't read it, but he ended up carrying all this out. And so today, when you look at the writings of some of these people and what they're saying, where they want to take the United States, their goal is to completely dismantle the United States and take down our Judeo-Christian ethic upon which this country was built. If you want to know what the ultimate goal is of these groups, that's it. Completely eliminating the U.S. as we know it. Because as long as you've got millions of people in the U.S. standing for our freedoms, it's difficult to have a world system of government when you have the most powerful and most influential nation in the world not on board with it. It wouldn't be a world government if you have everybody else doing it, but not the United States. So they have to break us down, tear us apart to be able to rebuild us according to what they want to accomplish and merge us into this world system of government.
Well, and I can't help but think how much, people want to dismiss voting in America, but that's our form that we get to have a voice in this. And
Right.
so many Christians are sitting it out.
We have to choose those people, not who are perfect, but those who would most closely align with our Judeo-Christian worldview, who won't work against us in whatever they do in Washington and at the state level. And also sheriffs, local sheriffs are very important. We've been blessed here where we live, north of Indianapolis. We've had an awesome Christian sheriff for the past 8 years or so. And in fact, he's part of a family that goes to our church. And when the whole COVID thing came about and our rhino governor at that time tried to force himself, in a draconian kind of way on our state of Indiana, our sheriff took a stand. He was the first one to stick his neck out. He said, "This is unconstitutional, and I'm not going to go along with this." Within a couple of days, 30 or 40 other sheriffs from around the state stood up with him. And then that emboldened the Indiana General Assembly that has quite a few Christians in it who, for whatever reason, were afraid to take a stand. They came out of the woodwork and said, "We agree. We're going to take a stand." And so Indiana remained quite open through COVID, a lot like Florida and a few other states, because one sheriff was willing to take a stand and it created momentum. And so politically, know who is running for your local sheriff's office and pick the one who would do the best job in defending our freedoms. That is not to be underestimated, the influence of the local sheriffs.
Oh, that's so good. Gary, this has been a fascinating conversation. Where can people reach you? And is there anything that we missed?
Well, we've been doing this for over 30 years, so there's always more to share, and things are unfolding so quickly. But no, people can go online, again, to GaryKah.org, and I've posted some of my more recent lead articles on there, and people can subscribe. That's how we support ourselves to do what we're doing, is through the subscriptions and also through speaking engagements and so forth. And then also my two books, the first one, En Route to Global Occupation. My second book was called The New World Religion, which looks more at the religious underpinnings and motivation behind a lot of this. And that's where we go into Alice Bailey and Helena Blavatsky and some of the psychologists. It's amazing. People, many of whom are being studied in our universities, like Carl Jung as a psychologist. If you take psychology at the college level, you're going to study Carl Jung in all probability. People don't know that he was involved in the occult heavily, and also his mother. And he just simply changed the terminology to make it more acceptable, but was practicing occult methods and techniques. And so anyway, we go into all that in the New World Religion and to try to make it practical. How are these things impacting public education and what we need to look for? And those are all available at our website. But if people want to be kept up to date on this, it's our journal, our Hope for the World update that they would want to subscribe to. And I just want to say I thank both of you, Mark and Amber, for the stand that you take. You're fighting the good fight. You've been out there on the front lines. It's not easy. And you know, we all experience our share of rejection because people are either afraid to take a stand on this, or they just don't know enough to realize that we're telling the truth.
Yeah.
And that there's a lot of misinformation out there. And Jesus said, you know, in Matthew 24 in his Olivet Discourse in verses 23 through 25, he warned of what it would be like in the end times. And he said that even the elect would be deceived if that were possible.
Yeah.
Which tells me that a good part of this growing deception is actually going to take place in the name of Christ. People who invoke Christ's name and act like they're, you know, Christians, but when you look at what they really stand for, they aren't. And so we really need to be, maybe more than anything else, careful about that. Things that are being taught in our seminaries and by certain pastors in the World Council of Churches, that we don't step into those traps. So
that's right.
Anyway.
And the way to not do that is be reading your Bibles. Get a
Absolutely.
physical copy of the Bible to read it for yourself.
And read it.
Amen.
Yes.
Read it and study it. Know it. Yes.
Brother, thank you so much. It has been a wonderful conversation. We are going to have to do it again because there's always so much information to share. But thank you for joining us.
You bet. Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
And that's all the time we have for today, friends. Thanks for listening through to the end, and be sure to click that subscribe button so you never miss an episode, and share this with your family and friends. Until next time, march on, saints, and be filled with the Spirit.
Napoleon, don't be jealous that I've been chatting online with babes all day.